Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, we proclaim your greatness for what you have done, are doing, and will do. Thank you for your generosity to us. Lord, we're grateful to live in a nation where we can worship you in spirit and truth according to the dictates of our conscience. Thank you for protecting this land we love, for guiding its leadership, and for abiding in us by your Holy Spirit. Give our senators this day the wisdom to take advantage of the opportunities you give to make a substantive difference in a needy world. Use them to alleviate the suffering of the marginalized and to cause justice to roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Give our lawmakers today a deeper reverence for you. We pray in your sacred name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., June 27, 2012. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the state of New York, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
I move to proceed to calendar number 341S2237.
Clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 341 as 2237, a bill to provide a temporary income tax credit for increased payroll and extend bonus depreciation for an additional year and for other purposes.
Madam President, the next hour will be equally divided, with the majority controlling the first half, Republicans controlling the final half. We'll continue to debate flood insurance. I hope we can reach an agreement to complete action on this bill. We also need to consider the transportation bill and the student loan extensions before the end of this week. Going on here in Capitol Hill today, we've been in touch with the Speaker's office. Our staffs have been meeting. Senator Lott, when we come to these kind of bills, the Finance Committee is extremely important. And Senator Baucus, I've had many meetings with him and conversations with him, and he's key to getting everything done. He's needed in the highway bill, he's needed in the flood insurance bill, he's needed student loans, and he realizes that and has a tremendous obligation and burden to bear, but he's always comes through. He has a good relationship with his counterpart in the House, David Camp, and so I'm cautiously optimistic that we can end this week tomorrow, even if with a little bit of luck. But we may not be able to. We have to see what happens the next 24 hours, which will be key. Monday's United States Supreme Court decision strike most of the unconstitutional Arizona immigration law reaffirms something most of us already knew. The onus is on Congress to repair our broken system. No one denies the system is broken. But in the 40 hours since the Supreme Court's ruling, Republicans have engaged in revisionist history to explain why it's taken so long to fix it. Here are the facts. When Democrats brought a comprehensive immigration reform bill to the floor in 2007, Republicans filibustered the legislation. This legislation was led by Senator McCain and Senator Kennedy, among others. The Republicans filibustered this legislation even though Republican President Bush supported it. And they twice filibustered the DREAM Act, which would allow children brought to the United States by their parents to go to college. It would allow them to go to college, serve in the military, and work towards citizenship. Democrats have we've done everything that is humanly possible to pass comprehensive immigration reform. We've been trying to do it for years. 2 Congresses ago, we spent more time on immigration on the floor than any other issue. And we were spending that time because we were being slow-walked by the Republicans. The Republicans are divided on this issue. We're not. 90% of Democrats support comprehensive immigration reform and, of course, the DREAM Act. Every time Democrats offer to work together on comprehensive immigration reform, even bringing to the floor bipartisan ideas originally proposed by Republicans, the other side finds an excuse not to support the change. On the floor today is the senior senator from Illinois, Assistant Majority Leader. He was one of the pushers of the DREAM Act, but he had with him 2 Republican senators who were with him pushing just as hard. But those 2 senators have disappeared in supporting the legislation. Yet Republicans blame Democrats for inaction. Well, they can't have it both ways. They can't blame Democrats for not passing a bipartisan immigration bill when they're the ones who blocked the bill. Moving forward, Congress has 2 things in its favor. Thanks to President Obama's decisive action, the specter of deportation no longer hangs over the heads of 800,000 young men and women brought to the country as children. And the Supreme Court offered yet another affirmation that a long-term fix for a broken immigration system must come from Congress and not from the states. Now is not the time for the Republicans to continue this harangue that they've had. It's not our fault. It's time for them to work with us for a reasonable solution, one that continues to secure our borders, punishes unscrupulous employers who exploit immigrants and undercut American wages, improves our dysfunctional legal immigration system, and finally requires the 11 million people who are undocumented to register with the government, pay fines, taxes, learn English, and then they don't go to the front of the line, they'll go to the back of the line. They do this in order to change their status. If my Republican colleagues truly care about changing the status quo, they should step forward now and work with Democrats, not criticize from the sidelines. Unfortunately, Republicans who once favored a permanent solution for America's broken immigration system are deserting efforts to find common ground. And the only decisive voice on this issue today seems to be from Mitt Romney, who has called the unconstitutional Arizona law the, quote, model for the nation. That's what he said. He's also promised to veto the DREAM Act. He said that. I didn't. Democrats believe the kind of institutionalized racism in the Arizona law is hardly the model for reform in a country that stands for liberty and justice for all. And we believe upstanding young people who have never known any home but the United States of America should be able to go to college, fight for their country, and contribute to society, not face deportation. But at least we know where Mitt Romney stands on these issues, even if we disagree with him. He's for vetoing the DREAM Act, and he believes that the Arizona law is the model for our country. That's really too bad. As long as Republicans remain unwilling to vote for comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform, we will remain at an impasse. But I want my Republican colleagues to know this. As soon as they're willing to join us to craft a common-sense legislative solution that's tough, fair, and practical, we're ready to join them. Would the chair announce the business of the day?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, following hour will be equally divided and controlled by 2 leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the first half and the Republicans controlling the final half.
Madam President,
Senator from Illinois.
I'd like consent to speak in morning business.
Without objection.
Madam President, let me follow up on what the Majority Leader spoke to on the issue of immigration, because this is the right time to bring it up. I had a meeting, several meetings yesterday that were as touching emotionally as anything that I've witnessed as a senator. There were students who came from all over the United States of America to walk peacefully in front of the Supreme Court. They were dreamers, undocumented students who have attended schools or are attending colleges and schools in America. They're not asking for a special treatment, they're asking for a chance to earn their way into the only country they've ever called home. These poor kids out there literally have no country. They were brought here to the United States as babies and infants. They didn't have a choice in the matter. They were packed into a car or onto a bus, and they grew up in America. As Senator Menendez often says from New Jersey, he comes to the floor and reminds us these kids put their hands in their hearts and pledge allegiance to the flags every day. They only know one national anthem, Americans. And they're just asking for a chance to be part of this country. 11 years ago, I introduced a bill called the DREAM Act. It was a bipartisan bill, as Senator Reid said. Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah was my co-sponsor. In fact, we had words over who would be the lead sponsor on this. And I bowed in his direction because he was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And I felt, well, that will help us pass the bill. Sadly, today, there are only a handful of Republican senators who will even vote for it, and virtually none who openly sponsor it at this moment. What has happened in 11 years? These kids haven't changed. Their problem's the same. The country hasn't changed. It's still a nation of immigrants. And yet the Republican Party has decided it has no use for this approach. There are exceptions, and I thank those exceptions. Senator Dick Lugar of Indiana, a courageous man who 2 years ago wrote a letter with me to President Obama asking him to give temporary protected status to the DREAM Act students. I called Senator Lugar the morning of that announcement on June 15th and thanked him for his courage. It's rare, and it should be recognized. In his case, I believe it will be recognized by many. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska voted with me on the DREAM Act. That was a courageous move on her part, and I thanked her for it. She's a very independent person, and she said there are Hispanics in Alaska, though you may not think it, and they're watching this carefully and closely. Let me also salute Senator Marco Rubio. Some of my colleagues have criticized him for what he said about the DREAM Act. I haven't. I'm glad he's trying. I need Republican votes to break the Republican filibuster on the DREAM Act. Marco Rubio came to my office and offered a good faith effort to do it. And I told him, I'll stand by you. I think what you're trying to achieve is not what I want completely, but it's on the path to that goal. Let's work on it together. And he tried, and I salute him for trying. I hope he'll try again. So I look at the situation in this country today on immigration and wonder, can this Congress come together on a bipartisan basis and even honestly debate the issue? That's a challenge we should face because the problem is out there. The other day, my friend, and he is my friend, Senator McCain of Arizona came to the floor and talked about border problems in Arizona. It is a legitimate concern in his state and the border states. But I also would call to his attention an article I read this morning in the National Journal Daily that was written by Major Garrett, and it talks about what we have done on the borders of America. Now, I was one of those who thought we were going overboard. Too many agents, too much money, too many different ideas, but I bought into it and said if we have to do this first, let's do it. And even if it's more than I think is necessary, let's do it to prove our bona fides in terms of wanting to stop illegal immigration. Here's what he wrote, what Major Garrett wrote in this National Journal Daily. After President George W. Bush's attempt at comprehensive immigration reform failed, Congress adopted a default presumption in favor of spending more every year on border control. From 2008 to 2012, Congress devoted $17.8 billion for U.S. Border Patrol agents and equipment. From 2006 to 2012, the number of Border Patrol agents has increased 73%, from 12,350 to 21,370. The number of agents assigned to the nation's southwest border increased 67%, from 11,032 to 18,415. Excuse me. The House Homeland Security spending bill for fiscal year 2013 devotes $11.7 billion to Customs and Border Patrol, $77 million more than the President asked, and pegs spending for ICE, which is the Immigration Control Agency, at $5.8 billion, $142 million more than the President asked. The nation now has more Border Patrol agents and ICE detention beds, the 34,000 of them, than at any time in history. For context, Border Patrol apprehensions totaled 340,252 in fiscal year 2011. That's down 53% from 2008, due in part to the recession and lack of available work. But that number of apprehensions was one-fifth the total of the year 2000. Criminal and non-criminal deportations are also up, way up. This, too, is bipartisan. And he goes on to cite numbers showing that the Obama administration has deported more in the name of prioritizing deportations than even the Bush administration. So those who say we need to get tough at the border and tough in terms of deportations, I would say the evidence is there. In fact, it's overwhelming that we have done that. Now, my challenge back to them is, now can we talk? Can we talk about what to do about 10 or 11 million Americans living here who are in questionable status or undocumented? Can we come up with a reasonable approach to this that is fair to them, to the family, to the nation, to the workers of this country? I think we can. We should. Why else are we elected if we don't face an issue like that? The state of Arizona, I think, basically lost in the U.S. Supreme Court this week. Out of 4 major provisions in the law, 3 were stricken and 1 was put on probation. The Supreme Court said, we're going to watch you, Arizona. If you do this wrong, we'll be back. So, in fairness to Arizona, their argument is, until there's a national immigration law, we're going to take matters in our own hands. The Supreme Court said, not so fast. But that still doesn't absolve us from our responsibility to Arizona and other states. We have to move together to get this done. I've been listening carefully. I know where President Obama is on this issue. I sat just a few feet away from here in a room day after day working on comprehensive immigration reform with Senator Obama, Senator McCain, Senator Specter, and so many others trying to get this done. I know there was a genuine effort. I don't know where Governor Romney stands on this. It's hard to follow him. He said he vetoed the DREAM Act. Vetoed the DREAM Act. You know, is that the starting point of his immigration policy? I hope not. I hope he'll reconsider it now. And I hope that he will say, as I hope others will say, what the President did in granting temporary, renewable, protected status to these DREAM students is going to be the standard until we pass a permanent law. That is only fair. Looking into the eyes of those students yesterday, I just have to tell you, Madam President, that really is our responsibility, to do the humane, just thing. I'll close quickly because I see my colleague from Rhode Island on the floor, and I know he wants to speak in morning business. I got started in this journey because of a young lady named Teresa Lee. She was a Korean living in Chicago who was from a very poor family and decided that her only ticket to a future was the piano. And she became an accomplished pianist to the point where she was seeking admission to Juilliard in your state of New York and the Manhattan Conservatory. And only when it called for a Social Security number did she realize she had a problem. She had been brought to this country at the age of 2 from Brazil, where she was born, by her Korean parents and never filed a paper after she got here. So she called our office and we found out there was no recourse for her, no place to turn. The law said leave the country for 10 years and apply to come back in. That isn't fair. And so she went on to school at Manhattan Conservatory of Music to study piano. 2 families, the Foreman family and the Harris family in Chicago, paid for her education because they believed in this young girl. There's a great happy ending to her story. She not only graduated from the Manhattan Conservatory of Music, she played in Carnegie Hall. She had her debut concert there. She is now studying for a Ph.D. in music at Manhattan Conservatory, and she married a young man, and she is now a citizen. She could have been lost. Her talent could have been lost to this country if the law would have been followed 11 years ago as it was written. She was given a chance and proved that she was a person of quality who had something to give back to this great nation with her musical skills and ultimately her talent at writing music and teaching music. It's a great story and a lesson for all of us about the DREAM Act and what it needs to be. I urge my colleagues, many of whom have turned a blind eye to this, meet these young people, look them in the eye, and come to know that this isn't just a legal issue. This is a human issue. It will define us not only as a Congress, but as a nation. I yield the floor to the Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, before I embark on my own remarks, let me say how pleased I am to have the chance to follow the Senator from Illinois. I've had the chance, Madam President, to preside in the Senate, as you are doing now, on several occasions, and to be present on the Senate floor on other occasions when Senator Durbin has come to the floor to speak about the DREAM Act and his passion for the opportunity that it provides to young people who are here in this country through no fault of their own, who know no other home in the world, and who will one day be great Americans, people that will be leaders and performers and experts and scientists and really provide great value to our country. And I'm delighted that he is doing it again. His persistence matches his passion, and finally, with the President's decision the other day, it's beginning to reap some rewards, and I hope more to come in the future. I congratulate the Senator from Illinois. My remarks, and I'd like to ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Will be on the subject of our carbon pollution and the damage that we are doing to our world. As I try to point out every week, last week I was not able to, but Senator Kerry gave a wonderful, marvelous, very, very compelling speech on this subject. So we've kept the floor busy every week between the two of us, and I hope other senators will more and more join us. This is an issue that we have to address, and it is a disgrace, frankly, that this is one of the very few buildings in this country in which climate denial is still happening wholesale. Here in the boardroom of ExxonMobil, I think, are probably the two holdout locations. I wanted to address a few things that have happened this week, but I wanted to begin by correcting an error that I made in remarks last week when I came to the floor and spoke in favor of EPA's mercury and air toxic standards for power plants. This is very, very important to Rhode Island, as we are a downwind state, as is a good deal of New York, bombarded by Midwestern power plants that, frankly, deliberately send polluted air up into the atmosphere through high smokestacks so that it will land elsewhere. Well, guess what? We're the elsewhere. We were then about to vote on a resolution that would have voided these standards and put Rhode Island at considerable peril. Would have actually gone so far as to bar EPA from ever issuing a substantially similar rule. So it would really have had a lasting as well as a damaging effect. It was a reckless proposal, and I am pleased that we defeated it here in the Senate. During my remarks about this rule, I discussed the health hazards that mercury pollution poses for the people of my home state of Rhode Island. The pollution that comes out of these tall smokestacks, very often with no scrubbers of any kind, just spews right out, and it comes to Rhode Island in the form of a number of things. Ozone, that causes us to have bad air days, where children and people with breathing difficulties and old folks have to stay indoors. They are basically kept prisoner indoor because out-of-state polluters won't clean up their act. And the other is mercury. And mercury poisoning is a very serious issue in my state. Last week I said that the Rhode Island Department of Health warns that high-risk populations, pregnant women, women who may become pregnant, and small children should not eat any freshwater fish in Rhode Island because of the danger of mercury poisoning and mercury contamination. That is sadly correct. I also said that the Health Department warns that no one should ever eat any of the fish caught in 3 bodies of water in Rhode Island, the Quidneck Reservoir, Wincheck Pond, and Yawgoog Pond. That, sadly, is also true. Finally, I said that the Health Department suggests that anyone who catches freshwater fish in Rhode Island should limit their intake to 1 serving of this fish a month, so as to protect their health from mercury contamination. In fact, it's more nuanced than that. The Health Department has issued different warnings for the general population depending on the body of water. So it is not always true that anyone who catches freshwater fish in Rhode Island should limit their intake to just 1 serving, and I'd like to correct the record accordingly. I would suggest that Rhode Islanders consult the Health Department's website, where the agency lists fish advisories by pond and by river, and that way Rhode Islanders can make an informed decision for themselves and their families as to where and when our fish are safe to eat for mercury contamination. It does not obviously change the larger point that mercury contamination is a continuing public health problem in Rhode Island, and one that we can do very little about without EPA standing up for us and defending us, because in these other states it is a great deal for them to be able to poison our state's waters but get cheaper power in their states because they don't force their utilities to put scrubbers on and to keep themselves operating at appropriate levels of pollution control. On that same front, this was a good news week from the EPA. They have fought hard to show that carbon dioxide is in fact a pollutant under the Clean Air Act. That case was taken all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed that that could be the case if the EPA determined that those greenhouse gases might, quote, reasonably be anticipated to endanger public health or welfare. The EPA went forward, and in 2009 they made this endangerment finding. There had been some delays along the way, but I won't get into the history of that rule under the Bush administration right now. The EPA made that endangerment finding, and they promulgated 3 additional rules. One was the tailpipe rule, which sets greenhouse gas emissions for motor vehicles. The second is what's called the timing rule, which clarifies when the stationary sources are required to meet pollution standards for greenhouse gases. And the third is the tailoring rule, which limits the application of this rule to the big polluters, so that you're not going after small or inconsequential sources, that you're really targeting the folks who are putting out tons of pollution. So that was a very good day. The D.C. Circuit decision was really quite strong, and I'd like to take a moment to read some of it into the record. Industry petitioners, the court said, assert that the scientific evidence does not adequately support the endangerment finding. As we've stated before, in reviewing the science-based decisions of agencies such as EPA, although we perform a searching and careful inquiry into the facts underlying the agency's decisions, we will presume the validity of agency action as long as a rational basis for it is presented. So they went on to see what the rational basis was, and they say as follows. The body of scientific evidence marshaled by EPA in support of the endangerment finding is substantial. EPA's scientific evidence of record included support for the proposition that greenhouse gases trap heat on Earth that would otherwise dissipate into space, that this, quote, greenhouse effect, close quote, warms the climate, that human activity has contributed to increased atmospheric levels of greenhouse gases, and that the climate system is warming. Based on this scientific record, EPA made the linchpin finding in its judgment the root cause of the recently observed climate change is, quote, very likely, close quote, the observed increase in anthropogenic, meaning man-made, greenhouse gas emissions. They continue below. Relying again on substantial scientific evidence, EPA determined that anthropogenically induced climate change threatens both public health and public welfare. It found that extreme weather events, changes in air quality, increases in foodborne and waterborne pathogens, and increases in temperature are likely to have adverse health effects. The record also supports EPA's conclusion that climate change endangers human welfare by creating risk to food production and agriculture, forestry, energy, infrastructure, ecosystems, and wildlife. Substantial evidence further supported EPA's conclusion that the warming resulting from the greenhouse gas emissions could be expected to create risks to water resources and, in general, to coastal areas, like my home state of Rhode Island, I will interject, as a result of expected increase in sea level. Industry petitioners, the judges said, do not find fault with much of the substantial record EPA amassed in support of the endangerment finding, nor could they, I would interject. Rather, they contend that the record evidences too much uncertainty to support that judgment. But the existence of some uncertainty does not, without more, warrant invalidation of an endangerment finding. As we've stated before, awaiting certainty will often allow for only reactive and not preventive regulation. The language in the Clean Air Act describing endangerment findings, quote, requires a precautionary, forward-looking scientific judgment about the risks of a particular air pollutant consistent with the Clean Air Act's precautionary and preventive orientation. So here you have 3 judges of the rather conservative District of Columbia Court of Appeals throwing out all of the challenges to the endangerment finding, the tailpipe rule, the timing rule, and the tailoring rule, and recognizing that although there may be some doubt on the fringes, there is plenty of evidence for reasonable people to take sensible precautions and to do the right thing. As I've said before in other speeches, there is a strategy that is being pursued here by the polluting industries, and it is to create enough doubt, not to affect what's really happening out there, but to affect public judgment, to put enough propaganda into the system that people think, oh, maybe we shouldn't be so sure about this. The context I put that doubt in is how prudent a parent would be for the care of a child. The statistics are that 97% of practicing climate scientists acknowledge that climate change is happening, that we're causing it with carbon pollution, and we got to get serious about it. 97%. So translate that to your own life as a parent. Your child has symptoms, doesn't look right, you go to the doctor, they say, we're pretty sure that she's got this condition and that she needs treatment. The treatments may be a little unpleasant, it may be a little bit expensive, so you want to be careful, so you got a second opinion, you know? And you go to another doctor, the doctor says the exact same thing. You know, I've got a friend who's a doctor, let me just get a third opinion, and so you go to your friend who's a doctor, you get a third opinion. Most prudent parents at that point would probably act. What the polluting industry and the people who support them in this chamber expect us to do is to act like that parent, except go to 100 doctors, get 99 second opinions, and then when only 3 of them say, your kid's okay, don't worry about it, you don't need to do a thing, or there's some doubt about what the disease is, and 97 of those 100 doctors say, yep, she is sick and you had better give her this treatment, to ignore the 97% and listen to the 3%. No decent parent would do that. In fact, you'd probably lose your right to continue to be a parent for your child in those circumstances if the child welfare agencies became aware of the kind of risk you were putting your child to in those circumstances. But that's the way they want us to behave in this institution. It is, well, I'm at a loss for a word to describe what it is that would be appropriate to the dignity and decorum of this particular chamber. There's a magazine that is a rather conservative magazine. It is called The Economist magazine. It is hardly associated with liberal causes, environmental causes. It is a world magazine. And they have just done a special that is called The Vanishing North, about what is happening in the Arctic. And in their summary of the report, they say the Arctic's glaciers, including those of Greenland's vast ice cap, are retreating. The land is thawing. The area covered by snow in June is roughly a fifth less than in the 1960s. The permafrost is shrinking. Alien plants, birds, fish, and animals are creeping north. Atlantic mackerel, haddock, and cod are coming up in Arctic nets. Some Arctic species will probably die out. It is a stunning illustration of global warming, the cause of the melt. It also contains grave warnings of its dangers. The world would be mad to ignore them. It's printed in England, so mad has the English sense of that word, meaning insane. The main reason, the report continues, appears to be a catalytic warming effect triggered by global warming. When snow or ice melt, they are replaced by darker meltwater pools, land or sea. As a result, the Arctic surface absorbs more solar heat. This causes local warming, therefore more melting, which causes more warming, and so on. This positive feedback shows how even a small change to the Earth's systems can trigger much greater ones. The report continues, the worry that needs to be taken most seriously is climate change itself. The impact of the melting Arctic may have a calamitous effect on the planet. It is likely to disrupt oceanic circulation, the mixing of warm tropical and cold polar waters of which the Gulf Stream is a part. And thawing permafrost will lead to the emission of masses of carbon dioxide and methane and thus further warming. It is also raising sea levels. The Greenland ice sheet has recently shed around 200 gigatons of ice a year, a fourfold increase on a decade ago. If the warming continues, it could eventually disintegrate, raising the sea level by 7 meters. The ocean state of Rhode Island could ill afford a sea level rise of 7 meters. Many of the world's biggest cities, the senator from New York is presiding, she represents one of the world's biggest, would be inundated long before that happened. That's from the summary of the Economist report. If you go into the actual report itself, there are a few other compelling parts. The summer sea ice in the Arctic is at its lowest level for at least 2,000 years. 6 of the hottest years on record, going back to 1880, have occurred since 2004. The last time the polar regions were significantly warmer was about 125,000 years ago. This transformation is in fact happening faster than anyone had predicted. According to an authoritative 2011 assessment for the Arctic Council, quote, it is now becoming very clear that the cryosphere, the frozen part of the Arctic, is changing rapidly and that neither observations nor models are able to tell the full story. This is not without cost. The World Bank estimates, to continue from the article, the cost of adapting to climate change between 2010 and 2050 at $75 billion to $100 billion a year. Other estimates are higher. And here's where they conclude. Sooner or later, such arithmetic is going to force governments to get serious about dealing with climate change. It is already clear what is required: policies to put an appropriate price on carbon emissions through a tax or market-based system that is sufficient to persuade polluters to develop and adopt cleaner technologies. These are already available, and so is the ingenuity needed to force down their costs and bring them to market. But then in a sentimental closing, the article concludes, but the Arctic will nonetheless be radically changed. This much is already inevitable. So the denial that continues in this body continues to have a high price. As I have pointed out, the science on this is neither new nor questionable. The scientist Tyndall first determined about the carbon CO2 blanket that creates the warming effect back at the time of the Civil War. That was nearly 150 years ago. So there's nothing new about this. The fringe scientists that are used by the polluters to create this doubt for propaganda purposes are indeed a fringe, as this resounding decision from the United States District Court shows, and the perils that our planet is facing are manifesting themselves now in the Arctic. As one of the scientists said, I'll have to paraphrase because I don't have the quote in front of me, as one of the scientists said in the Economist report, when you get up here, Greenland, Norway, the Arctic, climate change is not a theory. It's an observation. It is what is happening around us. It is happening first in the polar regions because they're more vulnerable, but we're seeing it everywhere. Wildfires tear through the West. Florida is beaten under unprecedented levels of rainstorms. Insurance companies across the country are predicting even worse storms. The biggest insurers and reinsurers came to Washington to join with environmental senators to say, you got to do something about this. This is really coming. These aren't liberals. These aren't environmentalists. These aren't people from the Sierra Club. These are the flinty-eyed accountants of the major international insurance and reinsurance companies, and their warnings deserve listening. So my time has expired. I will yield the floor at this point, and I do not know if I should suggest the absence of a quorum or if Senator Thune is going to be speaking. I'll suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
Madam President.
Senator from South Dakota.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, I also ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Madam President, I come to the floor today to talk about our economy, the threat of the pending fiscal cliff, and the need to address the challenges that we face. 2 years ago, last week, the Obama administration hailed the advent of the summer of economic recovery. The President claimed, and I quote, "The economy is headed in the right direction." And Vice President Biden confidently predicted the creation of 250,000 to 500,000 jobs, new jobs a month. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner published an op-ed in the New York Times boldly entitled, "Welcome to the Recovery." Well, 2 years later, Madam President, Americans are still waiting for the recovery. Today's jobs figures are well below the 250,000 to 500,000 jobs per month that Vice President Biden forecast. This year, the economy created a dismal 77,000 jobs in April and just 69,000 jobs in May, less than half of the 150,000 jobs that are needed each month just to keep up with population growth. Unemployment, which the White House predicted would shrink below 6% by April 2012, has remained at or above 8% now for 40 straight months. Looking at the facts, it is clear that the private sector is not doing fine, and in fact that the President's economic policies have made the economic situation in this country worse. The President seems to prefer more stimulus spending from Washington, D.C., but the President's $831 billion in stimulus money has not led to the job creation he claimed it would. Under this administration, there's been a record 4 years with deficits over $1 trillion. The federal government now borrows roughly 40 cents out of every dollar that it spends. In fact, the fact is, Madam President, we do not need more government spending that explodes the national debt. Instead, we need to cut reckless government spending and tackle the mounting debt crisis through tax and entitlement reform. Madam President, if we don't take action soon, our country could end up in the kind of financial disaster that Greece and Spain are now facing. The economic situation in Europe is a clear warning sign for our country that if we don't get on a sustainable fiscal path, we will face a similar fiscal crisis. Our children and grandchildren should not have to pay for Washington's inability to stick to a budget. We owe it to the next generation to leave the country better than we found it. Yet it has now been over 3 years since the Senate last passed a real budget. In part because of the Senate's failure to pass a budget, we face a pending fiscal cliff that must be addressed before the end of the year. Madam President, financial markets and job creators are going to react to the uncertainty coming out of Washington. We need to act now rather than kick the can down the road to a lame duck session of Congress at a time when it will be very difficult to make these types of decisions, where things are going to be rushed, where members are not going to have an opportunity to really focus in a thoughtful way on the right solutions for this country's future. One aspect of the fiscal cliff that we're talking about is the pending $1.2 trillion sequestration scheduled to go into effect on January 2nd of 2013. I, along with Senator Sessions and others, have pushed for more transparency from the administration as to how they plan to implement sequestration, a provision that was adopted just last week as part of the Farm Bill. This information is critical so that Congress and the American people have a full understanding of sequestration's impact. If Congress is going to consider delaying or replacing the defense sequester, we need this information in order to make those decisions. House Republicans passed a bill last month that replaces the defense sequester scheduled to go into effect next year, and it does so by finding savings elsewhere in the federal government. Yet the administration continues to stonewall requests by Congress to help us better understand where the planned sequester cuts will take place. On the tax side, a family of 4 earning $50,000 per year would see their tax bill increase by $2,200 next year, according to the House Ways and Means Committee and the Joint Committee on Taxation. The Joint Committee on Taxation also estimates that nearly 1 million business owners would face higher taxes if the top 2 tax rates increase. Yet, Madam President, not one vote has been scheduled in the Senate to prevent this tax-mageddon. In contrast, House Republican leaders have a different view, and it's expected the House will consider an extension of the current tax rates next month, which will then come to the United States Senate. Madam President, the economy continues to grow at a very slow rate. Unemployment remains above 8%. Congress must get to work to jumpstart our economy and put this country on a sustainable fiscal path. We need to act now rather than to kick the can down the road. And, Madam President, to put a fine point on that, the fiscal cliff that we will run into at the end of the year, as I mentioned, we already know that it's going to have a profound impact on the economy next year because the Congressional Budget Office and other analysts have looked at it and determined that it could cost us as much as 1.3% of economic growth in the first half of next year, which translated into actual jobs numbers is about 1.3 million jobs that would be lost because of this fiscal cliff if it's not dealt with. But, Madam President, there's also a more immediate concern, and that is the uncertainty that's created by the fiscal cliff. And the decisions that are being made right now by people across this country, by job creators, small businesses, investors, is shaped by and based upon the fiscal cliff that's going to occur at the end of the year. And so the Congressional Budget Office has also suggested that this is not only something that's going to have an impact down the road prospectively, but it also could have an impact right now as the economy contracts as a result of that uncertainty, and investors and small businesses and job creators take their capital and keep it on the sidelines as opposed to putting it to work, creating jobs and growing their businesses. And the Congressional Budget Office has suggested that it could cost us 0.5% of economic growth, not next year, but this year, Madam President. And that is why it is so important that we work together here to address the fundamental issues that are going to impact this economy before the end of this year. And by that, as I said, we've got to address the rate. The rates that are going to expire at the end of the year include the marginal income tax rates, the dividends rate, the capital gains rate, estate taxes, all kinds of other provisions in tax law that expire at the end of this year. And if you're a small business or an investor and you're thinking that starting January 1 of next year you're going to be facing a massive tax increase, obviously you're going to think long and hard about putting your capital to work now to create jobs and grow the economy. In fact, I think, Madam President, for many small businesses, as they look at the circumstances they find themselves in today, they're faced not only with the fiscal cliff, the potential tax increases, but also a massive amount of regulation that makes it more difficult, more expensive for them to create jobs. Those are the issues that we should be focused on, because the most important thing that we can be doing right now is getting the economy growing and expanding again and creating jobs for American workers. That's not going to happen if we don't take steps to avert what is clearly a terrible disaster waiting in the future with the fiscal cliff and all the tax increases that are going to occur at the end of the year. Madam President, the Joint Committee on Taxation has said that 53% of pass-through income, 53% of pass-through income would face higher taxes on January 1 of next year. That's all your S-corps, all your small businesses, all those folks out there in our economy, the entrepreneurs, who are the people that we rely upon to get our economy going again and put people back to work. When they're looking at those types of tax increases starting January 1 of next year, it is going to make it very, very difficult for them to make the investments that are necessary to get this economy growing at a rate that will generate the kind of job creation that will get Americans back to work, that will get this unemployment rate back down, and start creating confidence in the American public about the future of our economy. And so, Madam President, I would just simply close again by saying that this is not something that we can afford to kick down the road. We've done that for way too long. We have a massive problem ahead of us with regard to entitlement spending, which has to be addressed in the form of entitlement reform. We need to reform our tax code to make it more simple, more clear, more fair, and to create a more competitive tax code with the countries around the world with whom we have to compete. And Madam President, we need to do something about this burden of regulation that we place upon our businesses, and which is making it more difficult for them to compete in the world marketplace, and certainly making it more difficult for them in the near term to do what's necessary to get jobs created in this country and get Americans back to work. So I hope we can do that. It would be my expectation that the United States Senate, if and when the House passes legislation to extend the tax rates, which I'm told, are going to do sometime next month, I hope that the Democrat majority here in the Senate will take that up, and that we will put a bill on the President's desk that would provide the kind of certainty that's necessary for our small businesses and our job creators as they look at the future, that will enable them to move forward with those investments, put their capital to work, and put American workers back to work. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Yeah, Madam President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to compliment my colleague from South Dakota for his commitment and continuing focus on jobs and the economy and the impact that has on our nation and our future. I come, as I have week after week, with a doctor's second opinion about the health care law, which is in many ways directly tied to the economy and the economic situation that my colleague from South Dakota was commenting on. We have seen continual unemployment of over 8%, now 8.2% unemployment. People graduating from colleges who can't find work, who are going back to live with their parents, and that's because the President focused on a health care law, and the Supreme Court will rule on it tomorrow, but he focused on that instead of focusing on what people at home were concerned about: jobs, the economy, getting the economy moving again, bringing the economy back to health. A healthy economy is what people were looking for. So I come to the floor today, Madam President, to talk a bit about things that have happened since the health care law was passed, because President Obama and Democrats repeatedly promised that the health care law would do several things. One, they said it would make health insurance more affordable, and they also said it would help create jobs for millions of Americans. Millions of Americans, they said. In fact, after the Senate completed passage of the health care law, the majority leader, Senator Reid, said, quote, "This, of course," he said, "was a health bill." He went on. He said it was also a jobs bill. He went on. He said it was also an economic recovery bill. He said it was a deficit reduction bill. He said it was an anti-discrimination bill. He said it was truly a Bill of Rights. And he went on to say, and now he said it is the law of the land. An economic recovery bill, he said. A jobs bill, he said. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi added, it's about jobs, she said. She said in its life, health care reform would create, she said, 4 million jobs, 400,000 jobs almost immediately. Well, Madam President, that's not happened. It's not happened. Another broken promise to the American people. And that's why I've come to the floor week after week to point out issues with this health care law, which I continue to believe is bad for patients, bad for the providers, the nurses, and the doctors who take care of those patients, and terrible for taxpayers. And, Madam President, one of the key components of the health care law that the President promised would help create jobs was what he referred to as the small employer health insurance tax credit. Back in April of 2010, the President said, quote, this health care tax credit is pro-jobs, it's pro-business, and he said, and it starts this year. Well, in essence, the credit was supposed to offset the cost of health insurance for small businesses so that they could provide insurance to their employees. The President's Council on Economic Advisors made some estimates. They estimated that about 4 million small businesses, they said, would be eligible for the credit. The administration was so proud of the initiative that they sent out millions of postcards to small businesses. Now, I believe they actually never read it, didn't understand how it worked, because Susan Collins, senator from Maine, stood on the floor of the Senate and said, hey, look how it really works. It's not going to work the way you have described it. But no, this administration that knows better than anyone, they were so proud of the initiative, they sent out millions of postcards, and according to the IRS, 4.4 million postcards were sent out. Who paid for it? The taxpayers. Remember them? Those are people at home where only 1 in 3 of them think the country's heading in the right direction, and so many of them believe that their tax dollars that they send to Washington are not being used well. Well, White House ignored them and urged small businesses to look at the tax credit criteria and to take advantage, they said, of the credit that would be available. So what has been the response across the country of the small businesses, the over 4 million that received the postcards saying, hey, look what we're doing for you? Well, according to the Nonpartisan Government Accountability Office, only about 170,000, actually 170,300 employers were able to claim the credit. Not 4 million. Oh, no. And of these 4 million that got the postcards, how many were able to take full advantage of the credit? Only 28,000. In other words, the credit only benefited about 4% of the businesses that the President promised to help. 96% of the businesses that the President promised to help got nothing. Only 4% of the businesses were able to benefit at all, and even a smaller number than that were able to take full advantage. Well, the Wall Street Journal analyzed this issue in a recent article. The article featured Michael Griffin, the owner of a small advertising agency in St. Louis, Missouri. Michael had this to say about the tax credit that the President promised and held up as some wonderful thing that he was doing. He said, quote, you're penalized for giving people a higher wage and more professional opportunity. Is that what the Democrats believe, that we should penalize businesses for giving people a higher wage and more professional opportunity? Well, Michael went on to say, I appreciate any kind of tax reduction, but I can certainly not applaud a reduction that limits growth and the opportunity for employers to pay more to their employees. But that's exactly what this tax credit did. It reduces it limits the growth of a company, and it limits the opportunities for employers to pay more to their employees. Now, Mr. Griffin is not the only small business owner who's had problems with this tax credit, this big promise by the President. Jeffrey Birdall, an accountant from Allentown, Pennsylvania, spoke to the Associated Press about this very issue. He described the calculations required for the tax credit as mind-numbing. You know, people pass laws here. I wonder if they read them, they understand the implications. I believe that they don't. He described what this Congress passed, what the President touts, as mind-numbing, and also pointed out that for many of his clients, this accountant's clients, he said the money they received from the tax credit was offset by the money that they had to pay their accountants to just try to figure out if they could receive any of these credits. In this same AP article, Terry Gutierrez from Raleigh, North Carolina, stated that in some cases, he said, the tax credit is more hassle than it's worth. More hassle than it's worth. And the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, confirmed that these experiences, they confirmed these experiences in their report. They found many small businesses are deterred from claiming the credit. Why? Because like so much that has come out as part of this health care law, it is just so complex. The report highlighted the fact that it requires 15 separate calculations. Okay, so the President sends out a postcard, 4.4 million people paid for by the taxpayers to say, hey, you may get a tax credit. 96% of the people that get the postcard end up with nothing. Why? Did anybody look at this? 15 separate calculations, 7 separate worksheets just to calculate the amount of the credit. The GAO was told by tax preparers that it would take their clients anywhere from 2 to 8 hours, or possibly longer, just to gather in the necessary information to just start to calculate the credit. On top of this, they found that tax preparers spent, in general, 3 to 5 hours calculating the credit. This from a postcard from the President that says you're going to do things for you? This is not the kind of help from Washington that small businesses are looking for or want or deserve. The American people deserve better. So for all of this trouble, GAO determined that the average amount claimed per small business across the country, less than $3,000. $2,700, average amount claimed. It's clear that this policy is just another broken promise of the President's health care law. Since the President recently said that the private sector is doing fine, we can remember him. You've seen him from the White House giving a speech saying the private sector is doing fine. The ineffectiveness of his small business tax credits may not bother him one bit. But it does bother most Americans. And as I speak with my neighbors across Wyoming, I know that the truth of their lives is very much different than what the President may believe. Many Americans are also concerned about the fact that bureaucrats at the Internal Revenue Service seem to benefit the most from the tax provisions in the law. According to the Inspector General for Tax Administration, the IRS will need nearly 1,300 new federal employees in 2012 to implement the President's health care law. That's what they're asking for. 1,300 new federal employees for the IRS. In a report issued on June 14th of this year, just a week or two ago, the Inspector General pointed that enforcing the small business health insurance tax credit, said, is one of the reasons why the agency must expand. They need 1,300 new federal employees so they can put forward and deal with this so-called tax credit that only 4% of the people that the President said would help have actually received any credit, and the amount that they've received so very low that for most of them it wasn't worth even doing the paperwork. While the President and Washington Democrats may believe that adding employees to the IRS is the key to job creation, I respectfully disagree. The private sector is not fine, and the government doesn't need to get any bigger. This is why I have fought and will continue to fight to replace the President's health care law with real reforms that will improve competition, increase consumer choice, and lower the cost of care for all Americans. I mean, that's what this was all supposed to be about in the first place. Patient-centered care, giving people the care that they need from a doctor that they choose, not that the government chooses, not that the insurance company chooses, but that they choose at lower cost. And that, Madam President, is why I come to the floor week after week with a doctor's second opinion about a health care law at a time that I still believe that this health care law that the Supreme Court will rule on tomorrow is one that is bad for patients, bad for providers, the nurses and doctors who take care of those patients, and is terrible for our taxpayers. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Gonzalez.